My name is Nora Bennett. And if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here telling strangers my story, I'd have laughed. But sometimes sharing your scars is the only way to stop them from bleeding. If even one woman out there hears this and finds her courage, then it's worth it. I've lived in the same cedar-shingled house outside Portland, Oregon, for nearly 40 years. It's a quiet neighborhood tucked between pine trees and rain-slicked roads. Folks here still wave from their porches, share tomatoes from backyard gardens, and gossip at the farmer's market every Saturday. The kind of town that prides itself on knowing everyone's business, except apparently mine. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married 44 years. We raised one son, watched him build a life in Seattle, and settled into our familiar rhythm. Morning coffee on the porch, Sunday service, and his fishing trips that always seemed to stretch a little longer than expected. I thought we were the lucky kind of couple, the steady ones who survived the storms. That illusion shattered one muggy July afternoon. The day began like any other. The Oregon heat had rolled in heavy and slow, thick enough to make the window panes sweat. I was in the kitchen making raspberry jam from the berries we'd picked earlier that morning when Daniel called from the hallway, jingling his truck keys. "Running to town for a few errands," he said, glancing at his reflection in the glass door. "Might stop by Greg's to check out that fishing rod he's selling." I smiled, wiping my hands on a towel. "Take your time. I've got the book club girls coming later." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, quick, distracted, and walked out the door. The screen slammed shut behind him, and for a while, everything felt just as it always had. I hummed to the radio, stirred the pot, and watched the sunlight flicker through the lace curtains. Half an hour later, I remembered something that made my stomach tighten. His on blood pressure pills. Daniel was careless with his medicine, always forgetting a dose and blaming it on getting old. The doctor had warned him, missing even one day could make his pressure spike dangerously high. So I grabbed the orange bottle from the counter, slipped into my sandals, and stepped into the garage, thinking I'd catch him before he left the neighborhood. But the space was empty. His old, blue Ford was gone. I stood there, listening to the faint buzz of cicadas, feeling an unease I couldn't explain. He said he was just running to town. But something about the silence, the stillness, made me pause. Then I noticed his fishing gear, missing from its usual hook. If he was just going to look at Greg's rod, why take his own tackle box? That's when curiosity, and something colder, started to creep in. Daniel's pride and joy was his 1971 Chevy Nova. His baby, he called it. He never parked it in our driveway, said the sun would ruin the paint. Instead, he kept it across the street in our neighbor's carport, claiming her house had better shade. I'd always thought it strange. I walked across the street, medicine bottle in hand. The Nova gleamed under the dim light, spotless as ever. I brushed my fingers across the hood and tried to shake off the growing dread. Then I slipped my spare key into the passenger door and opened it. Heat rushed out, smelling faintly of leather and aftershave. I reached for the glove box latch. Daniel had complained it was sticking again, but when I pulled, it opened easily, and that's when everything changed. 5 small silver packets and spilled out, landing on the passenger seat with a soft thud. Condoms. My breath caught. My pulse roared in my ears. Daniel and I hadn't needed those in more than 3 decades, not since after my surgery. So why were they here? Then I saw it. A faint lipstick smudge on the headrest. Bright coral. Not my color. The world went silent. I stood there, my hand trembling around those little silver packets, realizing that the man I'd shared my life with for 44 years was a stranger after all. I closed the glove box, tucked the evidence into my pocket, and whispered under my breath, "Oh, you made the biggest mistake of your life, Daniel Bennett. Because Oregon has its storms, and I was about to become one. What Nora does next will turn heartbreak into revelation and set her on a path of quiet, calculated revenge that no one in that small town will ever forget. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain had started again, tapping against the roof in steady rhythm, but even that soothing organ sound couldn't calm me. I lay there beside Daniel, listening to his soft snores, and wondered how many times he'd come home from her and slipped into this very bed. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh from his side of the mattress made my stomach twist. His arm brushed mine, and for the first time in 44 years, I felt nothing but disgust. When dawn crept in through the curtains, I got up quietly and went to the kitchen. The house smelled like coffee and betrayal. I poured myself a cup and stared at the refrigerator door, covered with family photos, postcards from our son, grocery lists written in my handwriting, all those ordinary pieces of a life I thought I understood. By the time Daniel came shuffling in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, I had my mask back on. "Morning," he said, kissing the top of my head. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied, sliding his usual mug toward him. "Thinking about dinner tonight. Maybe that pot roast you like?" He smiled, distracted, already unfolding the newspaper. "Sounds good." I studied him as he sipped his coffee. Same thinning hair, same familiar hands that once built our porch swing. Nothing about him looked different. And yet everything was. After breakfast, he left for what he called a golf day with the boys. That's when I made my first call. My sister. June. Lived 2 hours south, in a small town near Eugene. She'd always had an eye for spotting lies, said it came from raising 3 daughters and 1 cheating husband. When I told her about the condoms, there was a long silence. "Oh, honey," she finally said, voice soft but steady. "You sure you're ready to know the truth? 'Cause once you do, there's no putting the lid back on that jar." "I need to know," I whispered. "I've been blind long enough." June exhaled sharply. "Then start watching, Nora. People like Daniel always leave a trail. They just count on you not following it." She was right. That afternoon, I cleaned the house like I always did. But this time, I paid attention. His receipts, his jacket pockets, the car keys, his phone charger. Small things that told quiet stories. In his glove box, hidden behind an old insurance paper, I found a receipt for a boutique hotel in downtown Portland. 2 nights, 1 room, paid in cash. My hands went cold. That was the same weekend he'd told me he was visiting our son in Seattle. The lies weren't just occasional. They were routine. Polished. Practiced. That night, when he got home, he smelled faintly of new cologne, something spicy and unfamiliar. He talked about his golf game, the weather, and traffic on I-5, as if nothing had changed. I nodded, smiled, even laughed once or twice. But inside, something had snapped. Trust, once cracked, doesn't heal. It crumbles. Later, after he went to bed, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat on the porch, watching the rain fall in sheets under the porch light. The sound was almost peaceful, like the world was washing itself clean. That's when the first real thought of revenge entered my mind. Not a dramatic kind. Not yelling or throwing things or demanding answers. No. What I wanted was clarity. Proof. And when I had it, I'd make sure Daniel faced what he'd done, in a way he'd never forget. I opened my old address book, the one I kept in the drawer by the phone, and found a number I hadn't dialed in years. Marianne Dalton. An old friend from my teaching days, whose daughter, Claire, now worked as a private investigator in Portland. My hand trembled only once as I punched in the numbers. "Dalton Investigations," a calm voice answered. "Hi," I said, steadying my breath. "My name's Nora Bennett. I was referred by Marianne. I need someone to find out where my husband goes when he says he's playing golf. There was a pause. Then the woman said quietly, "You'd be surprised how often I get that call." When Claire delivers the truth, Nora will realize Daniel's lies run deeper than she ever imagined, and her quiet anger will start turning into something far more powerful. Claire Dalton arrived exactly on time, like most professionals who spend their lives watching other people's secrets. She was younger than I expected, all brisk movement and sharp eyes, and she carried a slim black folder that somehow felt heavier than its size. We met at a small cafe near the river, a place with fogged windows and the smell of espresso. Claire sat down, placed the folder between us, and didn't bother with small talk. "I've got what you asked for," she said, voice even. "Photos, dates, hotel receipts, and a couple of bank transfers. It's not pretty." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Show me." She opened the folder and slid a glossy print toward me. The first photo was unmistakable. Daniel, leaning in to kiss a woman on the stoop of a townhouse in northwest Portland. Up close, you could see the laugh lines at his eyes and the way his hand rested on her back, casual and intimate. The woman's profile was familiar from the photos Claire had collected. Elise Hart. Mid-50s, hair cropped short and dyed a warm honey blonde, always smartly dressed. She lived in a tidy row house with potted ferns out front and a Mercedes in the driveway. She was not some teenage fling. She was a polished, composed woman who had built a comfortable life of her own. More photos spread out. Daniel sliding into the passenger seat of Elise's car at a restaurant parking lot. Two of them entering a boutique hotel downtown. Daniel carrying several shopping bags from an upscale store with Elise smiling up at him. One photo showed them at a small bistro, hands touching across the table, his face flushed with attention. Claire tapped the photo with a nail. "We followed them for 6 weeks. Twice we caught them at the St. Julian Hotel, room 412, paid cash. There are receipts for dinners, flowers, and several trips to the spa. Also," she hesitated just long enough to let me brace, "he's been moving funds, Nora. Small transfers into an account that belongs to a shell company he set up under his initials. About $28,000 over the past year." My head swam. The receipts confirmed the hotel stays. The photos confirmed the trips. The bank trail, well, that cut in deep. Money that should have been part of our retirement. For a moment, I couldn't think past the ache in my chest. "Did you confront him?" I asked, hearing my own voice thin and small. Claire's mouth twitched into something like sympathy. "Not my role. I document." She handed me a USB drive. "Everything's on here. Timestamps, GPS locations, copies of the receipts. If you decide to do something, use it however you like. But be careful. People react badly when their image is stripped away." I took the drive like it contained dynamite. It did. On the drive home, the river mist clung to the windshield. I kept thinking about the ordinary things. The jam I'd been making, the photos on the fridge, the way Daniel read the paper each morning. All those small, everyday acts had become camouflage for a secret life. He hadn't simply stepped out of our marriage. He'd been building a parallel one. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and laid the evidence out like cards. Photos, receipts, bank printouts, hotel confirmation numbers. The sterile little piles looked ridiculous and devastating at the same time. For the first time, my anger stopped being raw and became something with edges. Clear, cold, and focused. Revenge flashed through my mind. Not ugly, not violent, but precise. I wanted him to feel the same hollow embarrassment he'd been preparing for me in his other life. I wanted the community, our friends, everyone who'd admired our marriage, to see the truth. Not because I wanted humiliation for its own sake, but because truth was the only honest currency left between us. I thought about timing. Daniel's calendar was full of predictable events: the garden club luncheon, the senior center meeting, and our own 40th anniversary party the following Saturday. The party would gather everyone we knew. Neighbors, friends from church, past colleagues. It would be the perfect stage. As the plan began to take shape in my head, I surprised myself with the steadiness of my voice when I called Claire back. "Can you make copies?" I asked. "And hold on to them for now, discreetly. I might need additional documentation, hotel staff signatures, maybe some more receipts." "Of course," she said. "And Nora, be mindful. Once you set this in motion, people will take sides. Your son might not react the way you hope at first." I nodded, the USB cold in my palm. Michael had always had Daniel's easy charm. I didn't know if he would understand or if he would blame me for the spectacle. That thought lingered, sharp and private. I set the photographs back in their envelope and thumbed through one more. It was a picture of Daniel laughing, teeth bared, eyes crinkled, completely unaware his image would soon become the fulcrum of a life rearranged. I folded the envelope closed, placed it in my purse, and put the USB drive into the false bottom of my jewelry box, where I kept emergency cash. For the first time in months, maybe years, sleep came without my mind spinning. It was a wary, purposeful kind of rest. The next move would require patience, allies, and perfect timing. I had the evidence. Now I needed a plan that couldn't be ignored. Nora starts recruiting allies and assembling the stage for what she calls the Truth Night. But when Michael arrives from Seattle, everything she thought she planned begins to wobble. Will he stand with his mother or with his father? By Wednesday morning, the Oregon rain had stopped, leaving the sky a pale gray that made everything look sharper, almost too clear. It matched how I felt inside. No more confusion, no more guessing. Just quiet purpose. The anniversary party was set for Ramsauer's Saturday at the Maple Grove Community Hall, a small pine-scented venue where Daniel and I had celebrated birthdays and charity dinners for decades. This time, though, it wouldn't be a celebration. It would be his reckoning. Marge, my next-door neighbor and the unofficial mayor of our street, called mid-morning. "Nora, I'm still pinching myself. 45 years. You two are the example the rest of us try to follow." I swallowed the bitter laugh that threatened to escape. "That's sweet of you, Marge," I said gently. "I just want it to be a surprise for him. Can you help spread the word?" "Oh, honey, say no more. I'll make sure everyone's there. Half the town if you want them." "Perfect," I replied. When I hung up, I stared at the phone for a long time. Marge had no idea she'd just agreed to help me build the audience for Daniel's downfall. That evening, as Daniel came home humming to himself, I played the role of the loving wife one more time. "Long day?" I asked, spooning stew into his bowl. "Just meetings," he said, loosening his tie. "They're planning some upgrades at the senior center. You should come by one day. Everyone misses you." I smiled faintly. Everyone misses you. I wondered if he'd said those same words to Elise, if he told her he missed her too. While he talked, I noticed the smallest detail, a faint shimmer of glitter near his shirt cuff. Subtle, but there. Not from me. I hadn't worn makeup in days. He didn't even notice me noticing. Later, while he watched his crime shows in the living room, I slipped into the study and opened my old laptop. I wrote out a list, calm, methodical. Confirm guest list with Marge. Contact Claire for printed photos. Prepare speech notes. Hide duplicates of evidence, in case he tries to deny. Pick up anniversary cake. The cake would be the centerpiece. 3 tiers of white buttercream with delicate blue flowers. The topper, however, would be unique. Not a couple, but a single woman standing tall. Thursday, I called Claire again. "I need those copies by tomorrow," I said. "Big, clear prints." She paused. "You sure about this, Nora?" "Yes." My voice didn't even shake. I've been sure since the day I found those silver packets. By Friday night, everything was ready. The photos were trimmed, mounted, and hidden under a white cloth behind the cake table. My printed notes were tucked in my purse. Every word carefully chosen, measured like scripture, and sharpened like a blade. But life has a cruel sense of timing. That evening, Michael's had arrived from Seattle, a surprise, just like Marge promised. He burst through the front door, taller, busier, still with his father's easy grin. "Mom! Dad! Thought I'd surprise you two lovebirds." Daniel beamed. "Look who's here!" And just like that, the mask cracked. I had spent weeks building composure, but seeing my son hug his father made something inside me tremble. After dinner, Michael helped me clear the dishes. "You seem off," he said quietly. "Everything okay?" I met his eyes. For a heartbeat, I almost told him, almost confessed the entire rotten truth. But then I remembered the photos, the lies, and the woman in Portland. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired from planning the party." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "You've always been the strong one, Mom." When he went upstairs, I stood in the kitchen alone, watching Daniel wipe his mouth with his napkin and stretch, content and unaware. I whispered so softly that only the hum of the refrigerator heard me. "Enjoy your last peaceful night, Daniel." Outside, the rain started again. Light, steady, cleansing. Oregon rain always comes back. The party day arrives. Everyone Nora and Daniel know is gathered in one room. Friends, neighbors, even their son. But as she steps to the microphone, she knows what she's about to do will destroy everything, and finally set her free. Saturday dawned bright and cold. The kind of Oregon morning where sunlight glimmers on damp pine needles and the air feels sharp enough to cut. I stood at the kitchen sink, hands gripping the edge of the counter, and whispered a small prayer, not for forgiveness, but for strength. By sunset, everything would be different. The hall at Maple Grove smelled of coffee and carnations. Blue and white streamers hung from the ceiling, and the tables were set with the good china Marge insisted on, lending me. Guests began to arrive by mid-afternoon. Neighbors, church friends, people from Daniel's old office, all smiling and congratulating us on our amazing 45 years. The irony of it all almost made me laugh. "Where's the man of the hour?" Marge asked, bustling over in her sequined sweater. "Running a bit late," I said smoothly. "You know Daniel, always last to arrive." That gave me time to breathe, to rehearse my lines one more time. Claire had delivered the large photos in an unmarked envelope that now rested under the cake table, each one a blade of truth waiting for its moment. The cake itself was perfect. 3 tiers of vanilla buttercream crowned by a single woman figurine, elegant and alone. At 3:30, the door opened. Daniel walked in wearing his best gray suit, Michael beside him. The room erupted in applause. He blinked in surprise, then smiled that charming public smile he'd worn our entire marriage. "You sneaky woman," he said, kissing my cheek. "You planned all this?" "I did," I replied, steady as glass. "It's all for you." The music played, people mingled, and laughter filled the hall. Daniel basked in it, telling stories, slapping backs, raising his glass to 45 more. Watching him, I felt an odd calm settle over me. It wasn't rage anymore. It was clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop pretending. When the pastor tapped his glass for quiet, the room hushed. "Friends," he began, "we're gathered to celebrate the Bennetts, a testament to lasting love and faith." I stepped forward before he could go on. "Thank you, Pastor, but before we cut the cake, I'd like to say a few words." Daniel looked surprised but smiled politely. "Go ahead, sweetheart." I took the microphone. My voice didn't tremble. 45 years is a long time, I began. A lifetime of promises, of building a home, of believing you know the person sleeping beside you. I looked out at the faces, kind, expectant, curious. But sometimes, even after 45 years, you realize you never really knew them at all. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Daniel's smile faltered. "Nora," he started. "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "You'll have your turn." I reached under the table, lifted the white cloth, and revealed the poster board covered in glossy photos. Gasps filled the room as images of Daniel and Elise beamed beneath the fluorescent lights, his arm around her, his lips on hers, their hands intertwined in a hotel lobby. "This," I said evenly, "is where Daniel has been spending his time. And our savings." Marge's hand flew to her mouth. The pastor looked like he'd swallowed a stone. Michael froze, color draining from his face. Daniel stumbled forward, eyes wide. "Nora, stop this madness. It's not what it looks like." "Oh," I said. "So these aren't you? At the St. Julian Hotel? At dinner with your mistress? At the bank transferring our retirement money to a secret account?" The room buzzed. Whispers, shocked exclamations, pity. Daniel's jaw worked soundlessly. Michael finally spoke, voice shaking. "Dad, is it true?" Silence. Then quietly, "Yes." It was the only honest word I'd heard from him in years. The murmur grew into a low roar of voices. Daniel's shoulders sagged. He looked around, desperate for an escape, but there wasn't one. Truth had a way of filling every corner. I turned back to the crowd. "I didn't plan this to humiliate him," I said, though that was partly true. "I did it because no one deserves to live a lie, not even me. Sometimes you have to burn the old house down to see what's left standing." Then I looked at Daniel. "You can leave now." He opened his mouth, closed it again, then walked toward the exit. The sound of his footsteps swallowed by the murmurs. Michael followed him halfway, then stopped and turned back to me. His eyes were wet. "Mom," he whispered, "you didn't deserve any of this." "No," I said softly, "but I survived it." After the hall emptied, I stayed behind, collecting the paper plates and discarded napkins. The decorations drooped in the quiet air. The poster board leaned against the wall, its glossy evidence catching the fading light. I thought I might feel guilty, but instead, I felt lighter, like a window had opened after years of stale air. Outside, the sky had turned gold over the fir trees. Rain threatened again, as it always did, but I didn't mind. I stood on the steps and breathed it in, the clean scent of pine and possibility. By nightfall, Daniel was gone from our house, his closet half empty, his favorite recliner abandoned. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and let the quiet settle around me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's wife. I just felt like Nora. And for the first time, that was enough. If you felt Nora's pain in this moment, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Her story is just beginning, and the truth is still waiting to be uncovered.